The external things are never going to fill that feeling of not being good enough or not feeling worthy.
They don't stop using these patterns of survival strategies that get them the attention and the reward.
Many people don't say the thing, but they're feeling it. It's about having the courage to sit with that emotion. What is this that I'm feeling and what is it telling me is a really good starting point to better understand.
What does it look like or feel like when things start to feel uncomfortable, when you're starting to become aware?
To me, it's about having the courage to start asking the questions.
Welcome, everyone, once again to another episode of the Emotionally Wealthy podcast. Have you ever looked at someone who seems incredibly competent, driven, and put together, but by looking at them, you wouldn't necessarily be able to see that they're actually exhausted or anxious or even quietly disconnected from themselves? So many of us don't realize that some of the behaviors that we're most rewarded for in our culture, things like perfectionism and overachieving and hyper independence, those things can actually start as survival strategies very early on. And the thing is that because those patterns often work, they rarely get questioned. And as a matter of fact, they end up getting reinforced. So people keep going. They don't stop using these patterns of survival strategies that get them the attention and the reward that they're sometimes looking for, until that is one day they no longer know where the coping strategy ends and where their authentic self begins. My guest today is Dr. Claire Dowdle Cina. Dr. Cina is a Stanford-educated clinical psychologist, trauma and attachment specialist, and the founder of Eminent Mental Wellness. Now, what makes Claire's work so incredibly compelling is her ability to help people recognize when the traits that they've built around their identity are actually adaptations that once helped them survive difficult environments. So this conversation today, folks, is about trauma, perfectionism, attachment, and most important of all, how to reconnect with yourself when survival has been running the show for far too long. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Claire Dowdle Cina. Claire, welcome to Emotionally Wealthy. I'm so glad you're here.
I'm really happy to be here and to connect a little more with you and, hit record.
That's right. And here we are. I love listening to you on other podcasts. I love your Instagram. You're so real and authentic in the things that you communicate. It's something that I've shared with you in the past about what I see and get from you. But I'm curious to know, Claire, before you became the clinical psychologist and the trauma and attachment expert that we know today, what were some of those earlier messages and or experiences that shaped how you showed up in relationships before you had any of this knowledge or any of the expertise that you have since developed?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like as a younger person, there was maybe these two sides to me of one side being driven by achievement and perfectionism, and another that felt a little bit more true.
Mm-hmm.
And I was pretty goofy with my friends and my sister. I felt that I had an authentic part of me that I was able to express in some settings,
Yeah.
and then would feel that I had to be a certain version of myself, often in the classroom or at school, that was, I don't want to say it wasn't true, but it
Yeah.
was very polished and felt like it had to play a perfect role. And as a kid, you get praised for that, just as you were saying in the intro of I was the very polite kid at everybody's house. And I think that's in part a true piece, but I wasn't necessarily just flowing from a place of being myself. And, that gets reinforced over and over again over time. And really figuring out how to find that place of alignment of who you really are and what
Yeah.
achievements are based on what you actually want versus what is just being driven for a gold star because someone else thinks it's important. And that's hard.
Yeah, that is really hard. And as you're describing that experience, I'm kind of imagining you navigating those different environments. And it makes me think of the fact that sometimes the most praised parts of us are the parts of us that also protected us. Can you talk a little bit about what I'm referring to here in terms of how those things can protect us in these different environments?
Yeah, I certainly think that if you have any type of trauma or chaos in your childhood home, particularly, there can be beliefs that come from that along the lines of, I have to be compliant in order to be safe. I have to be perfect in order to be loved or accepted.
Right.
Those things keep a child safe in a certain environment and then become a problem later on because they keep you from actually going for what you really wanna go for and being true and authentic in relationships as well as in your work or other aspects of your life. So, one really important thing for people in healing these things is to see that they were protective and helpful and having more compassion for how they actually served you in a period,
Yeah.
a helpful view in moving through them as opposed to that frustration that really comes up for people of, "Why do I keep doing this? Why can't I move through this?" There's a point where there is frustration, and that is okay, but also seeing, "Okay, this was adaptive at one point, and now it's not anymore."
Yeah. And when you talk about that, those things being adaptive, and for those folks who are not familiar with that clinical term, adaptive, we're talking about like that worked, right? The things that kind of
Yeah.
worked and to get us what we needed, whether it was attention or help or whatever. When you talk about those things starting off as survival strategies and then sort of becoming how we are and function as adults, for you in particular, or maybe even for some of the clients that you've worked with, what are some of the things that we can start to feel or look at when things start feeling uncomfortable? Because a lot of times, obviously, we're just in this kind of automatic way of functioning. We're not
Yeah.
taking notice, right? What does it look like or feel like when things start to feel uncomfortable, when you're starting to become aware? Right?
Mhm.
What do sometimes people experience, maybe in their bodies or thoughts, or what are they noticing?
Yeah, that's a great question. Typically, there's some type of discomfort that's coming up for someone. A feeling of frustration, a feeling of, "All right, I achieved the thing I was working for. Why does it feel so flat?" Right? Why
Mm,
does it
that's a
feel
big
like
one.
what I thought it was gonna feel like, which was, "Now I'm worthy, now I'm whole." The external things are never gonna fill that feeling of not being good enough or not feeling worthy. That is internal work, and sometimes there's that chasing of the external in order to try to fill that, and it's important to notice the emotions that come up of, "Wait, why am I feeling this way? What is this frustration?" Often people are not wanting to feel these negative emotions, and they wanna soothe them and move on from them quickly,
Yeah.
but have a little curiosity and ask, what is this that I'm feeling and what is it telling me is a really good starting point to better understand.
Yeah.
I think with any authenticity, work, feeling aligned, part of what is tricky is that it's not that you find it and you check it off.
Yeah.
You are working towards it consistently. It changes over time. What
Yeah.
is aligned for you at one moment in your life isn't necessarily in the next. And so it requires a conversation with yourself that's ongoing and that's not just, oh, I found the thing and now I'm aligned and here we are off into the sunset. It is a process.
Yeah. And it's a hard one though, right? Because a lot of times we're not even we come from places or environments where um digging in or even being curious about our feelings is not a thing in our
Yeah.
households. We're so needing to be tuned in to other people's experiences, typically the
Uh-huh.
adults in the environments, right? We're looking to like see what the temperature is in the room, or how's dad when, his mood when he's getting home, or how's mom feeling or doing today when she gets home, or whatever it may be. So we're conditioned to be so dialed into other people's needs and the environment that the thought of even asking yourself these questions seems so selfish. It's actually sometimes it feels so uncomfortable. What is it that one feels when they're starting to ask these questions? And, why is it so difficult ultimately for people to even recognize?
Yeah. Yeah. Just like anything, it's a skill that takes
Mm,
practice. And if you have been wired, this is certainly true for a lot of girls and women in particular, but
yeah.
if you're wired towards other people's needs, it's a superpower we have. And also, you haven't had as much experience asking yourself,
Yeah.
what do I need? What do I feel? Like, it's not always just about going with the flow because over time, you're going to end up in a life that's not the life that you actually want.
Yeah.
You've just let other people make the decisions and you've just been tuning into them. And so to me, it's about having the courage to start asking the questions. It's about noticing when there's friction. I have a lot of clients who will say, yeah, I don't want to have conflict, so I don't say anything. But then I'm just so angry because I wanted to go out to lunch with my partner and he wanted to go play golf and I didn't say anything.
Yeah.
Okay, well, what would it
Yeah.
look like to actually just say, I'd love to have lunch this weekend? That sounds really simple, but those are the beginning steps of actually saying the thing to somebody else. But upstream from that, it's asking yourself, what am I feeling? What is the frustration? Our emotions are data. And I think they're the most important part of this because many, many people don't say the thing, but they're feeling it and
Yeah.
they're acknowledge it. But it's about having the courage to sit with that emotion. I also really believe that having a better capacity for your own nervous system and your own emotions is a key to so much healing. Because as opposed to feeling like, okay, I feel this bad feeling and I can't handle it, the more that you can sit with and handle and tolerate, the more that you're able to get information and move in a direction that feels more comfortable for you.
I had this thought come up around articulation. I had a thought about how difficult it is sometimes for people to take that next step. Do you find that part of the work that people sometimes have to do is actually learn the language of communicating? I know that sounds weird because we all communicate, but like you said, it's a skill and it's like learning something new. It's learning a way to express something new in a way that you've never done it before, and it can feel so awkward and maybe even scary. So what are some of the things that you found, maybe even in your own experience, when you started to feel that tension, and now you're identifying, but the next step is now like, oh, well, how do I say, or what do I say, because I don't want to have conflict?
Yeah, and certainly a lot of times when people are holding that in, it comes out in a different way. Whether it's huffing and
Yeah.
puffing, whether it's then you're mad and it pops out of your mouth, there's a reason why passive aggressive is an expression. Uh, and so while people are saying, I want to avoid the conflict, I don't want to have the hard conversation, it's present even if you're not putting words to it.
Yeah.
So that is one thing that's helpful to remember. I would say first, it's noticing the feeling, taking some deep breaths, getting to a place where you feel regulated before bringing it up, and then saying to a partner or a friend or whoever it is, I would really like X. It would make me
Mm,
feel good if we could do X or you could do this. It's expressing how you feel simply and clearly. And I think when it becomes something where people feel like they have to explain it or have all these reasons around it, or they have a hard time saying it directly, it is hard then for the other person to really know what they're trying to say.
yeah.
And so I
Yeah.
would say it doesn't have to be perfect, but it's okay to express a need. That's a big part of what relationships are. And practicing in small ways is what's going to help when those bigger picture conversations come up around marriage and kids and houses and all the things,
Yeah. The
right?
really big stuff. Yeah.
Totally.
So taking just micro steps, right? Not trying to do like necessarily the big thing and have the big, big, big discussion, but maybe taking small steps
Yes.
around smaller things, right? That don't feel as potentially overwhelming. or like things that you can't handle. I love that because, again, it's one of the things that I think people really struggle with in terms of, okay, I've gotten to this part, and now what do I do with this?
Right.
Right?
Right.
Because this next part is scary.
And I'd also say I encourage clients all the time to start in interactions that really don't mean anything to them, whether it's with the
Mm,
or obviously you care about being kind to a person, but if you say it wrong, the stakes are so much lower. And
yeah.
so practicing speaking up and advocating for yourself in interactions that feel less emotionally charged than with a partner or a parent or a friend even.
Yeah, I love that. Again, doesn't feel so invasive, overwhelming, and can just be little steps to kind of build up your confidence. I want to switch gears to talking now about high achievers because those little steps that feels good. For someone, however, who tends to be, let's say, a high achiever or who tends to want to do things perfectly, one of the things that you talk about in your work is perfectionism. I'm curious, Claire, if like in your work, where do you see trauma disguising itself as as a competence or success or responsibility, and how does that even happen? I'm happy for you to start wherever you want, even maybe explaining how it starts and then how it then turns into this thing where it's now disguising itself as competence and all these other things.
Yeah. In that question, there's two parts that are coming to my mind.
Mhm.
One is I think when there's a feeling of not being good enough or not being worthy, that can often come from trauma. It's a very natural response to think, I'm just going to do more and that's going to feel better. I'm going to be
Yeah.
enough. I'm going to get enough, right? I mean, it makes perfect sense. Uh, so that is a really natural pathway that I find people gravitate towards achievement and perfectionism. If I'm just perfect enough, I will be good enough. And we know that that doesn't really work, but
Right.
it makes sense in a way. Um, I also think that workaholism, overworking is also a response to trauma or can be just like any other addiction type tendency where you are avoiding something inside of you by doing all the things and working, 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 working.
Yeah.
And I actually love working. I love learning. It's really something I enjoy. And also, I want to approach that from a place of joy and choice for the most part. I know that's a privileged thing to say. I think when it's coming from this place of I need to do more in order to get recognition, in order to feel a certain way about myself, can become a really hard situation to be in. Or I'm so anxious, I cannot sit with my own thoughts.
Yeah.
I'm gonna just keep grinding and not give myself any space for anything else.
Yeah, I'm the more productive I am, the better I feel that I'm doing. But what's really happening is that they're operating from a survival perspective or a survival mode rather than really genuinely being aligned with who they are or what they want. And so I find that so many times people mistake this hyper productivity and this hyper independence for strength. What are some of the things that they can look for to be able to discern whether they're actually in alignment with who they are and what they want to do, or that they're working from a place of survival? Because it's a tricky thing to figure out when it's your normal, right?
Totally. And most people have periods where they're working at times more than maybe they'd want. There's an ebb
Yeah.
and flow to work just like with other things. And so there are times when you might be feeling I'm working too hard and I'm burned out. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's coming from this survival place. I would say that so much of this is a question of where is their flexibility and choice?
Mm,
Where does it feel like I'm doing something that I can't stop or don't feel like I can stop in a flexible way. So if you're in a period of working hard and it's maybe too much and you're like, okay, I'm working really hard and I am finishing for this deadline and I know I'm going to have a bit of a break. It's an external thing that someone's putting on you and you're looking forward to having that time off and that time to reset.
Yeah.
That feels different than a feeling of I just keep piling more on my plate, not because I want to do this or take on this extra thing, but because I deep down know that I really can't sit with the quiet.
Ah,
And there's that feeling of sort of knowing that, right? I don't want any space in the day. I don't want any space in my brain. And that's one piece that comes up. Can also be that gold star syndrome, right? I just made that up, but that
I
feeling of,
like it.
I know, I need another gold star. Like that, I just can't stop with getting the accolade, with if trying to receive that piece of feedback. And so it might be confusing and also being honest and sitting with those questions when
Yeah.
they come up and that feeling of, am I being driven towards this for something that isn't actually from my genuine self?
Yeah. It's hard. It's really hard for people to understand when their perfectionism is being driven by or rooted in protection rather than actual ambition or genuine alignment with who they are, what they want, or who they want to be, what they want to do. Uh, because of all the things that you said, sometimes the way that we respond to things, these adaptive behaviors are protective, but when they continue to get reinforced, the behaviors continue to go and you stop checking in with yourself. Like this is where we lead to burnout and we lead to places of depression and anxiety.
Yeah, yeah. Another piece is asking yourself if you are climbing a mountain and you're moving towards something, is this actually the mountain you want to climb?
Ooh, that's good.
I feel that
Yeah.
there's many decision points before you get to a top of a mountain, and often I have clients coming in at all different ages, some retired actually, that have said, "I never really wanted to do that."
Wow.
And yes, we all need to make a living, and there are pieces to this that's not just about being aligned with your soul's purpose, and I get that. And I know that that's something that, earlier generations even had less of. So it's not necessarily about I have to only be doing my soul's calling for my work. I know that's not the truth for everybody. But what does it look like to balance things that actually make you feel happy and alive versus I'm just doing all the things that I'm supposed to do? And all of a sudden I'm getting all these accolades, but I don't care because I never cared about this.
It makes me think of the difference between functioning well and actually feeling whole. When I think about that scenario where someone who is retired and they're coming to you because they're really now only feeling okay, I finally have permission. I've done everything that I've needed to do. I've fulfilled all of my duties and now I can have permission to actually seek out what it is that I truly want.
And you know what happens is that they have no idea.
Yeah.
There's that disconnect of I never thought to ask myself what I like to do, what I want to do. Um, so that might be a more extreme case, but that is part of it as well, that when you just quiet that voice, you know what I was saying earlier
Yeah.
about spending the conversation with yourself? To me, that is such the core of all of this and self-care. It's not just taking a bubble bath. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
what do I need right now? How do I ask myself that question and listen to it and not just say, you're stupid for needing that. You don't really need that. I mean, we're wanting to talk to ourselves in a way that's kind.
Yeah.
And, um, I recently had a client who she was struggling with something. And the way that she's talking to herself is by saying, but you have all these things that are going great. I'm like, if my 5-year-old came to me and said he was feeling sad, and I said, well, after all I do for you and all you have,
Yeah.
and it just kind of hit her of like, "Oh, yeah, that actually," it's like you're not actually speaking to the core of what someone is saying and validating that we have struggles and you can be grateful still and hold other things as positives while also saying, I see this part of me that this isn't fitting. Or what do I need now that would be more aligned with me? Do I need to keep climbing this mountain if I hate this mountain? Can I pivot?
It's coming back to what you said earlier around flexibility, because what I'm hearing is a lot of either or, black or white thinking, and the work. It sounds like a lot of the work is learning that flexibility around. It can be both, and I think that's a difficult thing for people to wrap their heads around when they've been used to it's either this or that,
Totally. Yes.
right?
I mean, we learn these beliefs that we operate from, whether we know it or not, subconscious beliefs that we gain from childhood. And if you've had a chaotic or traumatic background, those beliefs are so rigid because they were put in place
Yes.
for safety and they're
Yeah.
paired with safety. And so that black and white thinking becomes, it feels like imperative to survival. And part of the healing is flexibility, is being able to see, okay, I see why that worked then. It's actually keeping me in a cage now. How
Yeah.
do I have more ability to hold multiple things at once? We all have different parts of us going on at all times that, the feeling of, I want to go to the party. I want to stay home. I want to go to work. I want to take care of my kids. I mean, there's all these different needs and things that are coming up, and being able
Yes.
to acknowledge them and tend to them at different times and in different ways is important.
Yeah. And, when you start being able to talk to yourself with kindness and compassion towards yourself, that points towards healing also. And the thing about healing that's come up, at least in the work that I've done around trauma, and I'm curious to know if you've had the same experience, but healing can actually feel somewhat threatening. Why is that healing or that type of flexibility or even practicing kindness to yourself? Why is that sometimes scary? Why does that feel, in some cases, not even safe?
Yeah.
Why is it
Yeah.
so hard for people?
The research that's come out of self compassion, and the number one reason people cite of being resistant to being more compassionate towards themselves is that they feel like they won't hold themselves accountable or have high standards for themselves.
Huh.
So, this comes out of Kristen Neff's work, but this idea of, if I beat myself up, I'm going to get myself to do the thing.
Mm,
I get it. And also, that doesn't actually, it's not actually the most effective way,
right.
because when we give ourselves a soft landing, we can take bigger swings. If I know that if I go out and go for something I really want, apply for something, and I know that if I don't get it, I'm going to tear myself a new one,
Yeah.
it's going to be much harder to do the thing versus if I know I'm going to come back to myself and be like, oh, disappointing. All right, we can pick ourselves up and learn from it and move forward. And that's really what we want to give our kids. I think that providing them, I think about this with parenting and how we treat ourselves, because there's just so many parallels. And there used to be a belief that we have to be super, super hard on our kids in order to get them to fall in line. And now we know that having boundaries is important, but also giving them that safe landing and that emotional connection is so important. And so
Yeah.
practicing that with yourself and figuring that out. A lot of people didn't learn it. It's really unfamiliar. They learned something different from their upbringing or their parents. We typically have our parents' voice in our heads before we figure out our own. And so it's something different.
Yeah.
And saying, giving yourself compassion doesn't mean you're saying you're allowed to do whatever you want. Like,
Yeah.
that's okay that you messed this thing up, or, I mean, that's a little bit judgmental, but that's okay that you didn't get this thing. Right? You're not just giving yourself a pass. It's about still holding yourself accountable and being kind to yourself. And that is, again, a skill that takes practice.
Yeah. Well, even, I mean, I just want to point back to a couple of things that you said a minute ago and how you caught yourself, right? This is what self awareness looks like. You were giving an explanation. You just said, oh, it's okay that you mess things up. And then you right away caught yourself and said, oh, well, wait, that's a little judgmental, right?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely talk to myself sometimes where I'm like, this stage of life is chaos.
Mm-hmm.
Kids and working and summer break. And there's moments when I'm like, "Oh, I'm dropping all the balls. Like, what is wrong with me?" And then it's like, all right, it's how I'm feeling. That doesn't mean that's true. And those thoughts aren't true. Okay, what am I dropping? What do I need to change? How can I hold some space for the fact that I'm doing all these things at once?
Yeah.
Um, right? Versus if I'm just operating from a place of you're dropping all the balls, what's wrong with you? If that's what's going on in my head and I'm moving through the world from that place, it looks way different than just acknowledging, oh, there's that thought. Okay.
Yeah.
How can I relate to myself in a better way?
And that leads me to your work on attachment, because these are not things that we're born with. We're not born with these mindsets and these ways of looking at life. We're getting that from someplace. And you often speak about attachment and childhood dysfunction. So, taking all of that within the context of attachment and childhood and these messages that we get early on, how would you say that early experiences shape the partners that we're drawn to, intimacy in relationships, and even maybe even the roles that we take on in these different relationships, the responsibilities? Help us get an idea or a perspective on how attachment influences all of these things and these mindsets.
Yes, that is a big question for sure. There's so many pieces to that.
Yeah, yeah,
Thinking about early attachment as being the template from which we operate and what we learn from that. So that's not just saying you're going to repeat exactly what you had in childhood, that it looks exactly the same. It's these underlying dynamics and the beliefs that are created about connection, love, yourself that then you bring to your adult relationships. So going back to, I have to be perfect to be loved as an example.
yeah.
You're going to show up as a version of yourself on dates and in a relationship. And then all of a sudden being like, I don't feel connected to this person. Well, you're not really being yourself. You feel like you have to be perfect. And then when you actually have an issue or you're imperfect, it feels like it threatens the relationship. And so it makes it hard to be authentic. So all of these sort of seeds, they're planted, and part of the job as an adult is to see what beliefs do I actually want to operate from? If this isn't helping me find the relationship that feels aligned for me, what beliefs would? How do I shift those? How do I start changing some of the things that I learned so that I can bring in other more helpful ways of connecting?
Yeah.
Um, you know, for some people, it's love and family is chaos, is codependence. So you might not have the exact same partner that you had as a parent, but you are probably going to recreate that type of dynamic where there's a lot of codependence or chaos or whatever it is.
Right.
It might look different, but it's that same core piece. And finding a way to be more comfortable being more yourself in a relationship. Part of that is being seen in a relationship. Again, that nervous system capacity to tolerate the emotions that come with more authentic connection.
Yeah.
Uh, Learning how to ask yourself what you need and want and follow through on that versus I have a lot of female clients who have this feeling of they're waiting to be chosen or they were chosen, but they didn't really choose, and now they feel dissatisfied versus it's your choice who you wanna
Yeah.
partner with, not just someone coming and choosing you. And
Yeah.
being active and empowered is important in actually finding what's gonna work well for you.
And Claire, obviously, we didn't go into attachment and attachment styles, but I'd like to ask you to maybe explain one in particular, which is secure attachment. And the reason why I'd like for you to maybe explain it to our audience is because I'd also like to know if, in your experience, people confuse chemistry and intensity or familiarity with secure attachment.
Mhm.
So, if you could maybe first explain what secure attachment is and then what it's supposed to look like versus what it's not supposed to look like.
Yes. I would definitely say with the chemistry piece.
Yeah.
People of course, it is very confusing when there's this chemistry with someone. to be able to see through that, to actually decide if the connection is working and if there's a security there. Um, so to me, secure attachment is really about an idea of a secure home base, is how I always think about it. We think about this with parents with children,
Yeah.
and the research that comes out of that of your child is wanting to see you, and they're also able to go out in the world and explore and come back to you. When we think about this with partners, to me, the most healthy, amazing partnership is the one where you are getting energy, you are feeling like you're coming back to and feeling connected, and then you're going out in the world and being brighter because of being able to have that home base.
Yeah.
So often, people's partnerships become such a source of tension and conflict and chaos that it's dimming them because of how much energy they're spending on the relationship. What that does do for some people is it keeps them from having to really look at themselves or what they want because it's so consuming.
Yeah.
And so that's the work for each individual of what am I avoiding in my own life or with myself that is making it hard for me to do that versus just hyper focus on this person. The secure base, the coming back to, the ability to have independence and also togetherness, that you're not counting on another person to provide your happiness, but they help you be more happy because of the relationship.
Yeah. So the
Uh,
relationship is kind of a cherry on top
yes.
for what you've developed for yourself, the relationship that you've developed with yourself and for yourself.
Yeah, I would say cherry on top, but also there's that foundational, when you think about a base, right? It's
Yeah.
home base. So you're
Yes.
going out and exploring, and it's still that really foundational, important part of your life.
Yeah.
And also, you're two whole people. There's no, I was expecting you to make me happy, and now I'm pissed off because I'm not happy. Like, taking our power away to people. That's just not going to work. And um, so, yeah, I think that connection is a beautiful thing. And for people to keep striving for and moving towards that is good.
Yeah. Having that secure base where people can be two whole people who come together and not feeling basically the responsibility for the other person's emotional well-being, right? Like
Yes,
we add to each other, but we very clearly know who we are. And, you know, we're not taking on the responsibility of the other person's emotional health, which ultimately
yes,
we can't really control anyway,
totally.
right?
Yes,
But what about
yes.
for those people where they did not grow up in an environment where they were securely held, that their emotions mattered, that yes, you can fly the coop and the coop will still be here when you come back, right? Like that home base. What about for people who grew up in chaos or traumatic situations that are hard to explain? I find that a lot of times they feel stuck or doomed to stay in those relationships.
So much is coming to mind as you're asking this because I've thought a lot about that process for myself of what has it been that has moved me towards being
Mm,
be more securely attached. When you've grown up in a certain environment, there's a feeling like what you're saying, like, I'm the problem, like,
yeah.
I'm not dependable, and giving yourself opportunity to be that more for yourself and more for certain people in your life. Often, attachment isn't universal across all your relationships. Do you have friends that you've shown up for? Do you have a pet that you've had an unconditional bond with? I mean, for me, getting a dog in my 20s was actually life-changing because I'm like, "Oh, incredible. I love this animal. I'm showing up." I didn't believe that before that, even
Yeah.
though, like, okay, I'm showing up with these friendships. I'm showing up for myself. I'm committed to things in my own life. And that is the foundation of it because romantic love is the hardest.
Yeah.
It's not saying that you can't get there without I'm not you can get there, but I think the foundation is really more with yourself and seeing other relationships that you can build on that with. I also, growing up, there was a lot of chaos. My sister and I were we didn't have a perfect relationship, but we were so tight. And I really do believe that that was a foundation for me too of secure attachment of,
Yeah.
we could count on each other. And I knew that. So where are the places, who are the relationships that you feel that way? And what do they have? How do you show up in them? And using those as templates for yourself is important.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I'm so glad that you brought that up because so many of us, I think, look back and say, oh, well, we didn't have a parent, or maybe the caregiver, whoever your primary caregiver was, wasn't able to, for whatever reason, be that secure foundation for you. But maybe it was a grandparent, maybe it was a teacher, maybe it was a coach. So there are other ways of finding that secure base. And I think that when you do find that secure base, it helps so much, not just in building your resilience, but also in knowing that even if you don't have that at home, it opens up the possibility, oh, these types of relationships, they are possible.
yes.
It doesn't have to stay and be the way it was when I grew up or how I grew up, because this one person, maybe allows you the space to be angry if you're angry about something, to be sad if you're sad
Yes.
about something. It's being able to have just one person, the one person in your life that lets you know that you're not too much and that you are enough just the way you are.
Totally. And that also cracks out a belief of, if you have a belief, I'm too much. And
Yeah.
someone doesn't actually think that. Not everybody thinks that, right? I mean, it's not a true belief, but I would also say looking around in the world at examples,
Mhm.
if it's okay, my relationship with my dad was very difficult and problematic. Open your view, because often then we hyper focus on other
Yeah.
problematic relationships like that because we're like, see, all dads are like that, or all men are like that, or
Yeah.
whatever. And if you can open up your lens and start taking in examples of father figures you admire, men in relationships you admire, or that are working well, friendships with men. I'm using men as an example, but
Mhm.
start to actually notice, what is it about this person? How are they different? What do I see them bringing in their relationship that seems secure and solid?
Yes.
Because that's important to start noticing too. Our lenses stay really focused on what we know because we're almost subconsciously wanting to gain more evidence that it's
Yes.
all like that, versus being able to really zoom out and start taking in other examples.
Yeah, I'm again so glad that you said that, because we need to start looking proactively. This isn't necessarily something that's just going to fall on our laps. Self-awareness sometimes does require curiosity and proactivity. Sometimes we're lucky, it happens, and it does fall in our laps, but most of the time it does require a certain level of wanting to go in that direction. But there are going to be a lot of moments of discomfort and
Yes.
a lot of realizations of some relationships that don't work, that haven't worked for a long time. Whether you do something about it or not is a different story. But I'm talking about just the
Right.
recognition of patterns and relationships that don't serve you and probably haven't served you for a long time.
Right. Yes. That piece as well of, again, the nervous system capacity to be able to feel like I can handle
Yeah.
I can handle if this relationship ends. I can handle making a choice to be by myself if needed. I can handle if this person's going to have a hard reaction to the thing that I'm saying, because ultimately, I really believe that we need to put ourselves above the relationship. And that doesn't mean we're being selfish and not compromising. But if you are always saying, I'm going to prioritize the relationship over myself and making sure this relationship is maintained over
Yeah.
myself, you have no leverage.
Yeah.
You're never gonna walk away, you're never gonna, like, hold that s flag in the ground or that stake in the ground when something isn't working for you, and I'm not saying it's about leverage and one-upsmanship at all, I'm just saying that I'm married, I love my partner dearly, I want to be with him. There are also lines that could get crossed that I would not stay, and
Yeah.
I say that because I love myself, and I'm not just making it work for it to work over what is true for me, and that is a hard place for a lot of people to get to,
Mhm.
where you're like, "I can handle whatever because I got myself." It's again that soft landing, and so spending time alone,
Yeah.
bolstering that relationship with yourself, listening to yourself, being more compassionate towards yourself, all of that is helpful.
Yeah, and the thought that came to me while you were talking about that was that if you're spending all of your time and spinning all your wheels trying to make a relationship work, what you're actually doing is reinforcing for yourself that you're not enough
Yeah,
on some
yeah,
level.
totally. Yeah, I think this question comes up a lot for people of it they say it's work, how much work?
Mhm.
And there are all these tricky things of how do you know?
Yeah.
Um, I don't feel like if you feel like you have to do the work for the other person,
Yeah.
well, if I don't hold him accountable to X, Y, or Z, he's not gonna do it. Well, that's his work. We're not meant to take on other people's stuff fully.
Yes.
We each have responsibility to ourselves, and sometimes that feeling of, "Well, if I don't do it for him, he's not gonna do it." Well, what happens if you take a step back and see what happens?
Yeah. Well, there's a certain sense of control that people think I think oftentimes they have when they're doing this. If I am, overperforming and overcompensating for whatever my partner's not doing, I think that there's an illusion of control that they can control the outcome in
Yes,
in some way.
totally. Yes, it is a false sense of control, and that is the work too for you to be thinking about if you are someone who's listening to this that feels like you have to be in control in the relationship in order to feel okay and safe.
Mhm.
That's the work to be thinking about within yourself of why is control linked to safety to that extent?
Yes.
And what does it look like to work on that so that you can actually feel like you're focusing your attention on what you actually want as opposed to trying to control someone who is by definition not controllable because that's just true of all people.
Right. Right. Exactly. Claire, you work with women who want to create healthier relationships. In your coaching program, you help women specifically overcome toxic relationship patterns. When you start working with women and they start shifting, they stop trying to earn love by adapting all the time to other people's needs. What are some of the things that you see changing, whether it's their behavior, whether it is in the way that they talk to themselves? What does that look like and what does that sound like when these women start to really um, become curious about themselves?
People come in for the romantic love piece, but the
Mm,
actual core of building unconditional self-love, t- everything in your life can change from that. I truly mean that. I don't feel like that's hyperbolic. The ability to move through the world from that place doesn't mean you like yourself every minute or you're not frustrated with yourself, just like any other unconditional loving relationship you might have. But the ability to know you've got yourself, the flexibility that comes from that, the choices that come from that, the swings you're able to take because of that. Um, it's just choosing partnership from a place of choice as opposed to need,
hmm.
negative beliefs. If you're choosing a partner from a subconscious belief of I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy of love, I don't deserve, my big one coming from my childhood is I don't deserve to have what everybody else has. All right, so what kind of partners am I choosing? Ones that treat me like shit. And it
Hmm.
reinforces, and I'm like, oh, there, right? When people understand that it's the beliefs that they have because of trauma that's driving a pattern, not the actual self underneath, there's freedom of like, "Oh my god, I
Mm,
actually not true."
yeah.
Um, and choosing partnership and everything else from that place is so powerful and so much more fulfilling than, "Well, I'm in this codependent relationship, I don't feel like I can leave, but here
Yeah.
I am, gonna live this way for the next 50 years."
Yeah. Yeah. Even as you're describing that, I was thinking about the word liberating and peaceful. You can almost see the anxiety kind of leaving. I was thinking of various clients that I've worked with and just thinking about the transitions that they've made. And again, seeing how they showed up in the beginning in therapy, very tense. And maybe as the change happens, they're still talking about the hard stuff, but it's
Yeah,
with a different stance. And their nervous system, like you were saying before, is in a different place. It's not in a place of high alert all the
yeah,
time. I think
yes.
that's what it is.
Yeah, totally. That confusion as well, a lot of times people say, "I don't know what's my anxiety and what's my true self."
Mm,
Get to a place where you know when it's your true self that's operating versus anxiety, trauma, attachment wounds, negative beliefs, any of that is so powerful in and of itself because, again, it's flexibility, but it's trust with yourself. And if you don't have that trust of your own choices and what you actually want, it's very hard to then feel like you're in a relationship that you're clear about.
yeah.
And so that clarity, you can also think about being in a relationship that you are in and you feel like, "I'm happy and I also can handle whatever happens," versus, "I'm happy, and if this person leaves me, I won't be able to tolerate it, I won't be able to live or handle myself," is a very different energy that you're showing up to that relationship in. And so the confidence and the security that you bring drives that secure attachment back to you as well.
Yeah. I think about the power of redefining because a lot of the things that you're talking about really point to reframing things for yourself, redefining things for yourself, and in the spirit of this flexibility that we've been talking about and changing that black and white thinking perspective. Can we apply that to trauma? How do we apply those principles to that?
Mhm. The principles of holding both things at once.
Or redefining, like, how do we take trauma,
Yeah.
which is the thing that holds us down,
Yeah.
and make it a superpower?
It's interesting because with trauma, there's not this sense of a silver lining. You know,
Mhm.
as I sit with my own history, I wouldn't choose it for them, I wouldn't choose it for me. And also, the work that you go through in healing it becomes a superpower.
Mm.
The work of knowing yourself, of tolerating the feelings that come alongside it, the courage it takes to face it. In some ways, it's easier to drink it away, work it away, do the other things, and avoid it for the rest of your life. I mean, it's not, spoiler alert, but it feels that way. But the courage it takes to show up and do that work, I think of it almost like going to battle with someone where you come out the other side and you're like, "We did that together." That's what you gain with yourself.
Mm.
Of just like, "Oh my god, I had enough love for myself to do that work, and now I operate from this place of real true knowing," versus when people haven't gone through trauma in the same way. I mean, everyone's gone through hardship, right? So there's nuggets of this for everybody, but if you haven't gone through it as intensely or haven't done the work, you might be operating fine in the world, but that depth
Yeah.
that you had to go to get there is unique and it's special, and it provides compassion for yourself and for other people, and it also just really allows you to go to a very, very intimate place with yourself,
Yeah.
and that to me is a superpower in how you interact with others and how you can really grow to a place of self-love. Trauma, especially any attachment trauma, part of the normal response is that people collapse that experience onto their self-concept or their identity, and it's hard to say, "This thing happened to me," versus, "Now this is who I am, and I see myself as damaged, broken, XYZ." And to be able to start separating it and realize that that's not who you are at your core is hard work, and it's beautiful, beautiful work. It is just very special to see people go through it, so
There are hardly any words to describe what happens when you see people coming into their own and becoming who they want to be, or who they were always meant to be, but hadn't been given the space or the permission.
yeah. I've had this visual in my mind about this for whatever reason of thinking about this core self as this kind of little nugget of energy and thinking about trauma as these almost blankets and layers on
Mm,
top. And as you're peeling them away, they don't necessarily fully go away, but you're able to see them and get down to that core self. And for a lot of people, they couldn't express themselves in childhood the way they wanted to. I think about someone like Taylor Swift going out at 12 years old and just feeling that confidence, and I'm like, I mean, that is awesome that she has these talents and also that she was able to do that because a lot of kids are too constricted.
yeah,
And so it's often seeing people get to that place for the first time in adulthood. And that I think is the sweetness of it of, oh, you're yourself now.
yeah.
And you've always felt it, but now it's bigger and brighter and not constricted in the same way.
Yeah, that reminds me of, in trauma work, we often say that a lot of times we are adults, physical adults, but emotionally sometimes responding from, an 8-year-old, 9-year-old perspective, right? And so this work that you're talking about around trauma and helping them come into their adult mind with that agency, with the new tools, with the new coping strategies, knowing that they have now better agency, better control over their lives, over the decisions, and, over their nervous systems also, that
Definitely.
they didn't
Yeah.
have when they were little, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because as a child, a lot of people felt like little adults, but
Yeah.
then as adults, they feel that feeling of, like, being in childhood, and not to say it's immature, it's just you need to heal that in order to then update the system,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so, um, yeah, I mean, I love being able to be with people as they experience that and move through it.
Yeah, there's just nothing like it. There really isn't. Claire, as we get close to wrapping up, I have one question for you that I always ask my guests, being that this is the Emotionally Wealthy podcast. How would you define emotional wealth?
I love this question, and to me, it's the ability to experience all the emotions at full range
Mm,
and to have the courage to be able to do that. You know, for me, at the heart of processing my trauma, there would be these periods of being very numb, and that feeling of, "Well, I'm not feeling this intense bad stuff, but I'm also not feeling joy," and
yeah.
that there's something about it. It's just like I can still almost feel the feeling of just like that hazy, foggy. There's, to me, almost nothing worse than living life that way.
Yeah.
And, one great thing about being a mom is I tell people if you want to experience all the emotions at all levels, become a mom. But there's something about that that I love and I welcome, like to be pushed to my limit in these different ways of vulnerability and fear and frustration and also love and joy. And you can't have one without the other. And so
Yeah.
if you just want to avoid the hard to like be in the safe space to feel okay, to me, that's not living fully.
Yeah.
Um, and just being able to be an open kind of canvas for those different things and be able to have the courage and the ability to move through that to me is emotional wealth.
Oh, beautiful. I had so many thoughts and so many feelings around that, but I know we're at the end of our time together. Claire, I would love for people to know how to get in touch with you, to learn more about your coaching program, about your therapy practice, and all the other incredible resources that you have. What is the best way for people to contact you or to learn more about you, if they wanted to learn more about your work with women and attachment and trauma and just healing? overall?
Yeah, the best place to find me is Instagram or my website. Both are Claire Dowdle Cina. And you can find me there. And I also have a link back to the psychotherapy practice that is a group practice based in Denver as well.
Wonderful. Dr. Claire Dowdle Cina, everyone. Claire, thank you so much for being here and for your generosity with your knowledge and with your time. I'm so appreciative. I can't wait to put this out into the world. This is going to be so healing for so many people. So many people are going to feel heard and seen.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This was really, really fun.
Oh, you're so welcome. And thank you. Thank you all for listening to the Emotionally Wealthy podcast. And thank you for showing up for yourselves. Every time that you show up here learning, you are showing up for yourselves. And if this episode gave you insight, clarity, or a perspective that you needed today, please share it with someone who might need it too. And if you're enjoying the show, leave a review. It really helps to move these conversations and help more people find them. And until next time, I invite you to stay curious, stay connected, and stay emotionally wealthy. See you next time. Oh, hey, quick reminder for you that this podcast is for informational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional advice, diagnoses, or treatment. Always consult a qualified professional with any questions you might have.
Thanks to our friends at BuzzSpear for helping with post-production and distribution.